Radio for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network.
All right, welcome, Fade to Black. How you doing? Today is Monday, June 3rd, 2024. Let's do this, man. Yeah, that's right. We got a brand new week coming up right now, tonight on Fade to Black. And I just came off a very, very, very busy weekend, and it started Thursday. I went out to Contact in the Desert and hosted their 10th anniversary party. Whole lot of fun, and getting friends and stuff up on stage. And we had a great band, Dirty the Queen, that was the entertainment for the night. They were amazing. And I posted a picture of them today on social media, today or yesterday. They are Dirty the Queen, the AV crew. Right? And it was so funny because I didn't know. And so they take the stage, and these are people that I work with all the time. And I walked out, and they were great, by the way. And they opened the show with Working for the Weekend. And I'm standing out there, I'm like, I know, what is going on? Who knew? It was amazing, and it was a great party. And if you were there, you know how much fun we had. And it went to the wee hours in the morning. It was so much fun. Anyway, so then I had to get back to LA to shoot some stuff, some episodes. And I got back in time, and I finished all of that late yesterday evening. And here we go. So, yes, another great week on Fade to Black. And what we've got lined up tonight, Dr. Andrew Gallimore is with us. He's live from Japan, by the way. And tonight we're going to be talking about DMT. I've titled this show, I stole it from him, called Channel Switch, The Channel Switch. We're going to be talking about that. Tomorrow night, Freddie Levi is with us, and we're going to talk about ancient past and future interconnections. Wednesday night, Susie Hansen is with us, and we're going to be talking about her life of contact, and it's an amazing story, and I can't wait for Susie. She is on Wednesday night. Then Thursday night, Bigfoot. Eric Altman is with us. We're going to be talking about Bigfoot and cryptids. So we've got an amazing week coming up on Fade to Black. Now that I've gotten Contact in the Desert out of the way, the Anunnaki premiere out of the way, I think there was something else. I have 5 major events coming up in the second half of 2024. And up next is Disclosure Fest, Stairway to the Stars, right here in Southern California at Castaic Lake. That is summer solstice weekend, June 21st through the 23rd. For tickets and information, this is a big, big event. Tickets and information, disclosurefest.org, not .com, .org, and the links are below. And then right after that, the 2024 Conscious Awards in Miami, Florida, hosted by Giorgio Tsoukalos. I will be co-hosting off stage because I am the announcer. Yeah, just like last year. So much fun. And tickets and info for that, it's a full weekend. We've got a conference, we've got a yacht cruise, we've got a all-star basketball game, and then, of course, we have the awards on Sunday. Tickets and information for that are also below. Now, Contact at Sea, the cruise to Alaska. That's coming up September 6th through the 13th. Tickets and info are below. You can click on the links, and if there is stuff still available for that cruise, just use my name, Jimmy Church. when you make your arrangements. Then we're going to Egypt in October. I think that is sold out, but you can get on the waiting list in case there is a last minute cancellation. And then that's in October. And then in November, I'm going to Peru with Brian Forrester. That is also sold out, but you can get on the waiting list too. And the links for that are also below. All right, let's get things started. Tonight we're going to discuss DMT, and like I said, I've completely plagiarized Andrew with this, the reality channel switch technology. We're going to be talking about all of that. He is a computational neurobiologist, pharmacologist, chemist, and writer who has been interested in the neural basis of psychedelic drug action for many years and is the author of a number of articles and research papers on the powerful psychedelic drug DMT. Also, the books Alien Information Theory, Psychedelic Drug Technologies, and the Cosmic Game, and Reality Switch Technologies, Psychedelics as Tools for the Discovery and Exploration of New Worlds. All of his links are below, buildingalienworlds.com. And I would like to welcome live all the way from Japan, Andrew Gallimore, doctor. So, Andrew, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
You get the first-time guest disclaimer. We've got a lot to talk about tonight, so let's just get the disclaimer out of the way really quick so we can get to the good stuff. Andrew, it's just you and I sitting on my couch having a conversation as friends, and where that conversation starts, it starts. Where it ends, but we're going to end as friends. There you go. You have to accept to proceed.
Got it. Accepted.
Oh, man. You know, this subject, it's too easy for me to just go, okay, so how'd you get into this? Well, okay, we'll save that for a minute. But today, DMT is a subject that everybody is talking about. And the component to it that also interests me greatly is that our body makes it too as well. That's pretty interesting. Is it possible that we could activate DMT and not even know it?
Well, yeah. I mean, we've known since the 1950s, really. Well, certainly we know since the 1950s that DMT is present in the human body. I mean, they've been looking for, there's a whole long and fascinating story in psychiatry that probably don't want to go into too much detail, but since the 1950s, scientists have speculated that perhaps people with certain psychiatric conditions like schizophrenia have elevated levels. They have some sort of dysregulation of DMT production in their body, which leads to aberrant levels of DMT in their brains, which is the cause of their psychosis and their hallucinations. I don't agree with that at all. But what these studies have shown, there's been dozens of studies that have drawn the blood, collected urine of normal people, schizophrenic patients, non-schizophrenic patients, all different types, and consistently found certain levels of DMT in the human body. And now we know that at least in smaller, lower mammals, rats, mice, etc., that DMT is present and produced in the brain, possibly in other parts of the body as well. It's a very simple molecule. It's very easy for the body to construct. So yeah, it's plausible. I don't think there's clear evidence yet that DMT is ever present in the brain at what we would call psychedelic concentrations, the kind of levels that are reached when you smoke DMT or when you inject DMT. But it's reasonable to suggest that perhaps under certain physiological, neurological conditions, DMT levels could be elevated and could reach those kind of states. And whether it's possible to hack the human neurophysiology to actually disinhibit or activate DMT production, who knows, right? But yeah, the fact that it's in the body and it's ubiquitous throughout the natural world, really, that in itself has always been something seems deeply profound about that. This very, very common, ubiquitous, universal molecule that's everywhere just happens to be the most efficient tool for switching your reality channel and transporting you almost instantaneously to this bizarre hyper-technological alien reality filled with advanced intelligent beings who communicate with you. That seems like a bit of a stretch to say that that's just happenstance or just a coincidence. There seems to be something deeper and important going on there.
And staying with that, with science today, and this is your world, but science today and the quantum side and the physics side, which is folding over into Hollywood, it's all about the multiverse and parallel worlds and extra dimensions and trying to quantify that and measure it and get into the labs. And this is what science is showing us. And yet we have this DMT and ayahuasca, which also suggests the exact same thing. Should science look at this if they want access to another dimension or a parallel world? Just focus some research on DMT?
Well, I think so. Yeah. I mean, it's one thing to speculate and to kind of generate mathematical hypotheses in obscure branches of mathematical physics and, posit the existence of alternate dimensions or alternate universes or parallel universes or whatever. That's one thing, but to actually be able to just be instantaneously almost transported and confronted by such an alternate reality. I mean, that to me, that's what could be better than that, to have direct access to these kind of places. So, yeah, it's
what could be better than that? Let me answer the question. Nothing, right? Nothing. So I had this is about 5 years ago. I had a film director, one of immense note. Okay, this film director calls me up. So, Jimmy, I got to tell you something. I said, "What's going on, man? Everything all right?" He goes, "Man, last night, I get on with it, right? I smoked DMT. Really? And aliens are real, right?" and so I said, "Tell me what happened." And so he described what has been repeated over and over and over again with other experiencers, including friends of mine that have tried this, and it can't be coincidence that everybody is having nearly the exact same experience. Can you explain why that is?
I can't explain why everyone has the same experience, and well, okay, it's kind of a little bit tricky, but what we can say is that, in my opinion, after having studied DMT for a couple of decades at least, it's not easy to explain neuroscientifically why your brain suddenly becomes capable of really constructing these entirely novel, inordinately complex, inordinately dynamic realities that really bear no relationship whatsoever to the normal waking world. I mean, the world, it's kind of kind of the fundamental way of thinking about this is that the world you experience is always being constructed by your brain. The world you experience now is this model. I call it a model of it's a reality model. It's a world model. It's your brain's best guess about what's going on outside in the environment. And your brain took millions of years of evolution to kind of work out or to evolve, develop its ability to construct this stable and predictable model of the environment. And it's the only world that your brain should know how to build, in my opinion. Even dreams are generally continuous with waking in for the most part. People dream about the things that go on in their normal waking life, down to how much time they spend talking on the telephone or watching TV. There have been lots of studies of this kind of thing, and that's not surprising because your brain is building the same kind of world. It's the only world it knows how to build, and so it's confounding that when people smoke this very simple plant alkaloid, suddenly the brain apparently becomes capable of constructing these incredibly complex worlds and incredibly dynamic, and that have no relationship whatsoever to the world that your brain evolved to construct. And so it's not easy to dismiss that and say it's just hallucination. It's like your brain is suddenly speaking a new language that it never learned. That would be confounding if I suddenly start speaking some South African click language, having never learned it. I've never had any exposure to it. That would be confounding, and no one would deny that would be confounding and hard to explain. And yet, when the brain starts constructing these bizarre, hyperdimensional, hypercomplex, hyper-technological realities filled with intelligent beings, people will say, "Oh, it's just hallucination. Your brain is just making it up." That's, to me, that's not an explanation. So the alternative explanation is that actually your brain is receiving information from some alternate source of sensory information that is guiding its construction, or even directing the construction of this alternate reality, which would suggest that you are indeed accessing some other place. I don't want to say another dimension or a parallel universe. We don't know the nature of it. We don't know the nature of our own reality, really, and the broader reality that we're embedded within. So I'm not going to be definitive about what this other place is, or what its structure is, or its relationship to our, lower dimensional world that we spend most of our lives within. But clearly, there's a huge problem, in my opinion, for neuroscience, and really for anyone with an interest in the nature of our existence and of our place within a broader reality. DMT presents a startling problem, a confounding problem that is not easy to solve.
I think that there should be a requirement to hold political office in the United States. You must do an ayahuasca ceremony, right? and I think that the world now, in a way, sure, it sounds like a funny joke, ha ha, but I think that there is something to that, and to open the mind to understand things beyond our own reality. Saying something like that isn't that cavalier, is it?
No, not at all. I mean, I think it should be a requirement for everyone.
Okay. So, I don't know what the laws are in Japan. Okay, I don't. But how far have you taken your research? Wink, wink.
Well, I mean, I've been in Japan for the best part of a decade, so just over 9 years now. I mean, Japan, it has the laws. I mean, there's a lot of kind of bullshit that goes around about Japan's drug laws. I mean, Japan is very hyper focused on cannabis for historical reasons. Because of you guys, actually. I mean, it was you guys drafted. I think it was.
I mean, they arrested right. They arrested Paul McCartney, right?
Yeah.
Paul McCartney of all, but how far can you take your research? And
well, I mean, okay, so I mean, I don't inject people with DMT in Japan. That's the kind of the bottom line here, certainly. But I mean, what I do now is, well, my major kind of work these days is thinking and writing about psychedelics. I consider myself to be a psychedelic speculator, psychedelic educator, psychedelic thinker, whatever. And there are no laws against that, certainly.
Yet.
I mean, we have a constitution in Japan, which you guys wrote, so we're kind of lucky in that respect. Unlike the UK, which we don't have a constitution in the UK. So we have kind of, complete freedom of expression here, which is great. But I'm currently working with a group called New Nautics, NOONAUTICS, they're based in the United States. We have a very large advisory board now, and actually have an institute which we're constructing on a small Caribbean island, where we have licenses to give people basically whatever drugs that we decide, but that will certainly include DMT, using this new extended state DMT infusion technology, which myself and Rick Strassman proposed back in 2016. So that's a whole different story. But the idea is that we will have a place in a location where it's perfectly legal for people to be administered DMT and any other type of psychedelics, really. So that's something I do from a distance, so to speak, kind of an advisory capacity, but no. So please don't write to me, anyone who's watching, and say, can I come to Japan and do DMT? Because that's not going to happen. But
it's not going to happen. Do you have you smoked it yourself?
Well, what do you think? I mean, I try not to kind of
the reason. Okay, that's fine.
There's
that's
a reason why I'll put it this way. There's a reason why I've spent the last 20 years trying to make sense of it.
Of course. And the reason, now I haven't. Okay.
No.
And I'll let me pre-qualify that. I haven't had the opening in my schedule where I'm in the right mood, my head's in the right spot, and I'm ready to go. It's go time. It's a real excuse. I'm going to do it. But here's the thing. With all of my research, and I have literally read thousands of accounts that people have written down about their experiences, and seeing not only the similarities between them, but I'm wondering if my experience when I do have it is going to be the same, or at some point do they become singular and independent?
Well, I think, to be honest, you can read as many trip reports as you like, but nothing will ever prepare you, in my opinion. I don't think there's any way to prepare yourself for what the actual experience is like. I mean, it is mind-blowing. The word mind-blowing could well have been invented to describe DMT. A true astonishment. Terence McKenna said the only risk with DMT is death by astonishment. It's something that you can't prepare yourself for. It's so utterly alien and bizarre that no matter how much you think no matter how many trip reports you've read, it will shock you to your very bones if you get a good hit of DMT. So it's people say, people ask me, when am I ready to take DMT? And the short answer is always and never, in a way. There's nothing. Yes, it would be good to have some experience with other psychedelics. Yes, if you experience with magic mushrooms, you might have some familiarity with these kind of altered state, these more psychedelic states of consciousness. But a good hit of DMT is going to take you somewhere where you cannot possibly anticipate. It exceeds the imagination, in my opinion, in all ways. So when people describe seeing, beings, people might imagine it like a dream or something, where these little beings are flying around, but actually it's far stranger, far more compelling, far more bizarre, far more complex than you could ever put into words. It's un-Englishable, as Terence McKenna used to say.
Right.
So, and it's only 10 minutes. So
now let's stay right there for a second.
Yeah.
That to me is both appealing right? Appealing and astonishing at the same time. And I have asked over and over again, are you saying that 20 minutes later, that's exactly what it is, that I can drive home? Yes, it's going to take you a while to unpack everything, but it's only 10 to 15 minutes and that's it.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's even briefer than that, really. I mean, if you take a good lungful of DMT, really before the pipe leaves your lips, the world will start to change. Now, assuming that you've got enough in your lungs, it's this great feeling of acceleration and being propelled through this very complex and dynamic procession of visual geometric imagery, and then you burst through, assuming the dosage is sufficient, into this other realm, and then you will look around wide-eyed, shocked, appalled, astonished, choose your word, for normally the peak is 2-3 minutes. Then, by the time you've got your kind of bearings, or before you've got your bearings, really, if it's your first time, you're kind of on your way back, and then you will pop back out again. You will still have after effects. There'll still be some, visuals, but you will basically have come back from there. You pop into their world for just 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes, and then you'll pop out again, and then you have the kind of the tail end of the effects, which lasts for another 10 minutes or so. But yeah, after 20 minutes, you're probably feeling euphoric, you're astonished, you're shocked, you're thinking, what the fuck just happened to me? This amazing feeling of, wow, that's something that I've experienced, something that I could never have anticipated or predicted. And there's a great sense of euphoria, in my opinion, that comes with that. So yeah, you could drive home. You might be a bit shaky, probably not necessarily a good idea, but in terms of the drug it enters the brain very, very rapidly. It's dealt with and metabolized very rapidly as well by the brain. So you're in and out in a few minutes, which is mercifully brief for most people. It's almost like it was designed to be that brief. You couldn't be there if it was like a 12-hour, something like LSD, for example, which could last for 10, 12 hours. That would be
exhausting.
Yeah, extremely
exhausting. Yeah, I can only take so much of Disneyland. There's a time to go. Now, the world that you enter, and again, this is just your opinion, but does this world exist alongside us? Is it always there, just a frequency off, that we're not observing it or seeing it, and that the DMT allows us to experience this other world?
It's a good question. So it's the world that you experience in the DMT state it's a model that your brain has constructed of a world, right? In the same way that the world that you're experiencing now is a model of what's going on in the environment, informed by noisy patterns of sensory information coming through your eyes. Your brain is using that to construct this working model that seems to function. So we don't know that the world that you experience is the same as, that is true or real or that kind of thing. We don't know that kind of mapping. All we know is there is something, we assume at least, there's something out there. And in the same way, in my opinion at least, your brain is receiving information from some other place. I don't know what that place, I don't think that place necessarily looks like or is like the experience. I think that's just your brain trying to make sense of this influx, this flood of alternate sensory information, and it constructs a model, or it is being directed to construct this alternate model. So I do think, I lean towards, the more I study it, the more I find it difficult to explain away. There's so many confounding aspects of the DMT experience that I struggle to explain away as a neuroscientist. So I do think there is some other agent, some intelligent agent, or some other place, I don't know, that the information is coming from into your brain, and that your brain is using that. So I always say you don't break through into the DMT world. The DMT world breaks through into you. It is kind of commandeering your neural world building machinery for a few minutes and using it. So it's your brain is like the stage, and this information coming in is like the director that is taking control of your brain. It decides what you see. I think it is commandeering, taking control over your brain for this very, very brief period of time. So, when you see a reptilian being or an elf or whatever, do these beings actually exist in that form? Probably not. I mean, the idea that these discarnate advanced intelligences would actually look like reptiles doesn't really make any sense. The idea that they would actually have the form of a living being, with a body, an embodied being, doesn't really make any sense. So I think you're dealing with some kind of intelligence, some kind of discarnate intelligence of form that we just don't understand, and it's taking on that form, if you like. Your brain is constructing a model of that intelligence.
So my friend said to me, the director, he said that these 3 alien beings, and he said they were ET, there was no question about it, came up to him, sat down, and started talking to him. And I said, what did they say? And he said, well, they spoke in gibberish, but I understood them. I said, okay, all right. Now I'm trying to go with, I have an open mind. Okay. That's happened to me before, but that's another story. So anyway, and he said that he talked to them for a few minutes and was asking them questions, and they were answering. He said, then they got up and walked away. And I said, well, how real? He said, no, you don't understand. This actually happened. This was real. This was not a trip, and I wasn't high. I went to this world and sat down and talked to these aliens, and they were as real as anything that I know. And he was profoundly moved by this. And this is somebody that I consider very pragmatic. I'm surprised that he did it, to be honest with you, but very analytical, black and white, very serious. And I've got a lot of respect for him. And for him to say it like this to me was that this was a real experience. There isn't another way to define it.
Yeah, that's very common. People describe it as being more real than real. And Terence McKenna back in the day used to say that the funny thing about DMT is that it doesn't affect your mind, in that you don't feel intoxicated, you don't feel stoned, you feel like this reality channel has been switched. It's like it slots into your neural machinery and just flicks a switch, whereas leaving everything else intact. So you remain completely aware, you have all your faculties intact, you're coherent, and yet you're in this utterly bizarre world that has no relationship to the normal waking world, with these incredibly intelligent and knowledgeable and powerful beings. It's hard not to come to the conclusion of your director friend when you actually go there, and it's not surprising. When people wake up from a dream, very few would deny that a dream is all it was. No matter how strange or bizarre, when their feet touch the floor on the bedside, they go, oh, that was a horrible dream, but whew, thank God it was just a dream. Same with psychotics. When schizophrenics recover from their, what at the time they thought were very, very real, hallucinatory experiences, when they're probably medicated and treated. When they come back, they begin to realize, God, what was wrong with me? How could I believe that? That was just a hallucination. And yet with DMT, it's very, very different. People come back having the most bizarre experience of their life, and yet they remain unable to shake that conviction that, perfectly sane people who've had dreams, who've been intoxicated with other things, perfectly sane people, rational people will say, no, this was real. I have no doubt in my mind that this actually happened to me, that I was being confronted by, I encountered some other extremely advanced, intelligent being. That's hard to explain, in my opinion.
Now, let me, on your chemist side, let me tap into that for a second. I'm absolutely fascinated when it comes to the recipe for ayahuasca, that which is millennia old, right? It's old. It's an old recipe.
Old. Yeah.
That combination of plants, that recipe was put together so long ago, and the way that it works is more fascinating than any modern chemistry we can talk about. But we're talking about a long time ago. And for that to have been processed and put together for us, it seems that it must have come from a more, I'm just going to say it, a higher divine place. I don't think that's accident. There's a lot of combination of grass and tree roots that you can put together that's not going to do anything for you, right? So where do you think it came from the universe, from some divine source?
Well, I mean, if you ask the shamans of South America, the indigenous peoples who invented this technology, I mean, that's what it is. This is a pharmacological technology that employs pharmacological synergy. Either of these plants, when ingested orally alone, have very limited, no effects really. There are recipes that involve, so there's basically, you've got two major principal components that I call the minimal binary decoction, which is the Banisteriopsis carpi vine, the ayahuasca vine, the vine of the soul, vine of the dead. This contains harmine, harmaline, what are called the harmala alkaloids. Without getting too deep into the chemistry and the pharmacology, these are monoamine oxidase inhibitors. They inhibit the breakdown of certain molecules that get into your body orally. They stop them being broken down. Now, if you ingest a tea or a decoction of this bark, Banisteriopsis carpi bark alone, you might get it has some mild psychoactive effects. It also makes you vomit and other nasty things. So it's not a particularly pleasant experience. And the other component of this minimal binary decoction is a plant. There's two main plants. One is called chacruna, Psychotria viridis, which contains the DMT. And there's another one as well, and several varieties. But anyway, you need a DMT containing plant as well as this Banisteriopsis carpi vine. And again, when you take a tea or a decoction of this Psychotria viridis, this chacruna leaf, nothing will happen. It contains DMT, but as soon as it gets into your stomach, it's very, very rapidly broken down, and it never makes it in sufficient concentrations into your brain. But when you put them together, you have this effect called pharmacological synergy. The DMT gets into your stomach, into your GI tract, but also you have the harmala alkaloids, which are inhibiting this monoamine oxidase enzyme, which normally would break down DMT. So they're working together synergistically, which basically allows DMT to escape being broken down and metabolized and gets into your bloodstream, gets into your brain, and has this remarkable effect. So it is a technology. And there are many technologies actually that these indigenous groups have invented over millennia. It's not just ayahuasca, but ayahuasca is probably the most sophisticated. Jonathan Ott, the famous ethnobotanist, described it as perhaps the most sophisticated pharmacognostical discovery of the last several thousand years. I mean, it's an incredible discovery. Was it by chance? We know that these ayahuasca decoctions often contain many different admixture plants, as well as the main two, which can modify and modulate the effects. Did they stumble across this over time? It remains something of a mystery. That would be the orthodox position. They arrived at it by chance. They would disagree and say, actually, the plants told us how to make this. I'm not going to disagree with them on that, because I think it remains something of a mystery of how this incredible technology was actually discovered.
Isn't it amazing how you're educated, and well, so am I, but you know what I'm saying? You're educated. And isn't it amazing? I like it how you snuck in the orthodox in there, because that's always the easy escape for those that either don't want to understand our distant past or are in denial that we had a technological civilization. We had a grasp on certain things that we have since forgotten about. We've got amnesia about that. But it was not, I can tell you the answer. It wasn't chance. That's generational drinking of concoctions, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. But I mean, it's remarkable. I mean, even if you look at completely unrelated plant preparations that they use, for arrow poisons, for example, you find that they, like curare is the most famous one, which contains strychnine, is an incredibly potent neurotoxin. And they found, back in the 1950s, Richard Schultz found that these curare paste, they didn't just contain the strychnine containing plant, but also had these plants from the pepper family, which seemed completely incongruous. It's like, what's that doing there? It was only later that it was discovered that these particular plants from types of peppers contain this molecule called piperine, which acts as a general, it helps the absorption. It speeds up, prevents the metabolism, and increases the absorption of the strychnine into the bloodstream. And so so these technologies are everywhere. They're not just throwing together, these plants are kind of hoping for the best. It's like they wouldn't be able to explain to you the pharmacology, of course, but they had an understanding that if you add this plant, then you add this one as well, it enhances, it makes this arrow poison more effective. So you find these technologies everywhere you look. So they're much more sophisticated and should be given much more credit than they normally are, just because they live in the forests and they're making these preparations in wooden pots or whatever over a fire. Maybe not wooden pots over a fire. That doesn't make any sense, but you get the point I'm making, right? It looks primitive. It looks primitive, and it's like, oh, these are savages or whatever. But actually, when you actually look at the technology, we're only just in the last few decades starting to understand the sophistication of these technologies, and ayahuasca is just one of them. And there are other DMT technologies, these snuffs, yopo and epina, which also contain multiple plants, some of which contain DMT, and the others which help to help the DMT to be absorbed through the nasal mucosa and get into the brain. So there's more to it than meets the eye with these technologies, and certainly, I see DMT as the molecule itself as being this technology, that they developed preparations to use this technology in the form of ayahuasca and other forms such as these snuffs. And what we're doing now, we're kind of picking up the mantle and saying, okay, how do we, using the tools of modern Western civilization, how can we develop this as a technology? And this has always been my opinion, is that we shouldn't necessarily stick to the indigenous technologies, but we have the tools available that they simply don't have and never have had to actually develop DMT as a technology. If we take seriously the idea, which I do, that we could indeed be accessing some kind of external intelligent agent, and if we are, then surely we should bring our best technological tools to the table here. That would be the way to respect this molecule. Would not be to sit on a hand-woven rug and face south during the full moon and with a glass pipe, and that's all very nice stuff, right? But
right,
and
right.
then
Well,
burst for 5 minutes.
Right. Okay, now put your doctor hat back on for a second, if we may. How does, let's just say DMT in general, how does that overtake our consciousness and our vision? Or are your eyes closed? And if they are open, how does that overtake our consciousness in such a dramatic way that it overrides our own vision?
Well, yeah, normally you would close your eyes. I mean, people do. Really, if you keep your eyes open, then it tends to interfere with the experience. I mean, with low dose experiences, because you've got, in my opinion, you've got two sources of sensory information. You've got the visual information, and then you've got this other source of sensory information. So
which is exactly my question, right? Yeah, right. You get it. Okay.
Yeah. So you close your eyes, dimly lit room, minimizing other sensory inputs, and basically you're focused on the inside, and then your brain will start constructing this alternate reality model. Whether it's entirely constructed by your brain really is just fabricating it, which I tend to not think that is a reasonable explanation, or whether it's you're allowing, somehow gating the flow of information from somewhere else, which I think makes more sense in some ways. It makes most sense to close your eyes and just, I mean, ideally,
how aware are you of your surroundings? For instance, let's say, hypothetically speaking, because I haven't done it, but let's say I'm in a room with 3 or 4 people and we all do it at the same time. How aware would I be, or how aware is someone of the other people in the room, or does that just completely go away?
Oh, it's gone. I mean, the first time, well, there we go. So the first time I did, I mean, I lost any sense of being human. The concept of ever having been a human was gone.
Stay right there. Now, why would you say that?
Because I mean, you're instantly transported to a place. I mean, being human and remembering it's the feeling of being human is also connected to your environment, right? You're embedded within this. My sense of self as Andrew Gallimore, it's not an isolated concept. It's connected to everything that's around me and my whole experience and my past and my future, and my present, and it's not something you can kind of isolate and say that's who I am, so to speak. So when all of that disappears instantaneously and is replaced by some other completely discontinuous, completely disjoint alternate reality, it's perhaps not entirely surprising that you forget what it means to be a human. So that can be very disorientating, to say the least, to not really know how you got there. I mean, you're still cogent, you're still kind of alert, very much alert, but you often will forget, what the fuck is happening here, and you have no concept. And then as you start to come down off the experience, you start to get little pieces of your humanity start to come back, and you start to realize that you are human. You exist in a human body, and that you'd taken this incredible molecule. So yeah, I think that's one of the more startling aspects of the DMT experience, is that loss of your humanity. Really, in a sense, you become the alien. You become this alien intelligence embedded within this alien reality for a brief period of time.
Is it easy to accept? No anxiety or fear going in? It's just a natural transition.
Oh, there's definitely fear going in. I think even very experienced DMT users, I mean, even Terence McKenna used to say that his hand would shake on the pipe. He'd taken it many times, but there's still something about it that is so it's so profound and shocking, that there is always some trepidation. What are you going to see this time? It's not always going to be the same. It's not always going to be pleasant. You're not guaranteed to have an audience with some beautiful, benevolent mother figure. It could well be you could be thrust into some domain with decidedly menacing creatures who taunt you and mock you, and it's unlike other psychedelics in that. Well, there are others, Salvia divinorum, which also is kind of like that, but certainly, there's fear, there's anxiety, pre-flight jitters is what people often refer to it as.
Right. Should you 100%? I'm with you on that. Does one normally prepare with a goal going in? Right, you've got a question that you want. So there's something profound, or maybe there's something personal inside. Or do you just go in? Just let's go.
I don't think there's rules on that. Some people do. Some people have certain intention when they go in. They might have a problem they want to deal with. They might have some people have psychological conditions. They have perhaps historical trauma, and they want to deal with that. Or some people just want to allow themselves to be taken wherever they are carried. And I think they're both perfectly acceptable reasons. You shouldn't go in there with casually. You have to realize that these are extremely bizarre and extremely powerful domains, and you shouldn't do it flippantly, certainly.
Not for sport. You're not doing it for sport.
No, it's not a party drug by any stretch of the imagination. But I don't think people will tell you have to do it like this, and I tend to push back against that. I don't like that kind of elitism where this is how you do DMT. We found the correct way, and if you don't do it like this, then you're disrespecting it, or sacrilegious in some way. I don't think that's the case at all. Everyone has the right, in my opinion, to access these domains, and everyone can, relatively easily. It's not difficult to acquire the raw materials to extract DMT. It's not difficult to consume, which again is one of the most. It's also part why DMT is so remarkable, is that it is so ubiquitous that anyone can access it. It's the most democratic, really, of the psychedelics, in that it's so easy to obtain, it's so easy to extract, it's so easy to use, it's so easy to go to these places. So and I don't think we know enough about DMT or the DMT world or its relationship to our world to be kind of making definitive statements about how you should and shouldn't use it.
I'll tell you when you should. Okay, so let's say I don't use bad words on this show, but I'm gonna push the boundaries here a little bit. Let's say you've got a friend who's a bit of a dick, right? A little off-putting, just a little rough, a little hard to put up with. You don't invite him to your house, kind of thing. Could somebody like that, could us benefit by having our friend Mark go and have this experience, to the point where, is it possible that afterwards people around him would go, "Hey man, that Mark is pretty cool, right? He's, let's go ahead and invite him to the house this weekend. He's changed." Is that possible?
Well, I think there are a few experiences that are more humbling than the DMT experience. I mean, the DMT entities have the real potential to humble you in ways that you
Straighten you out, to
possible,
straighten you
you know?
out, straighten you out.
Absolutely. So if you go in there with a lot of hubris, particularly, I think, scientists who discuss DMT, often academic neuroscientists who've never taken DMT, are quite happy to go, "Oh, these are hallucinations." My favorite, some guy on Twitter referred to entity encounters as illusory social events. Which I thought, I want to know the kind of parties he's going to. I mean, it's easy to kind of come up with these names, illusory social events. But these are not social events, and whether they're illusory or not, well, we don't know the answer to that question. But clearly, someone like that, give them a good hit of DMT, and then ask them what they think about these so-called illusory social events. And
that sounds like a post from Neil deGrasse Tyson. I'm just saying that's very Tyson-ish right there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. They know what's real and what's not real. They know what hallucinations and what isn't hallucination, and that's that, as far as they're concerned. But the only true surefire convincer is a glass pipe and 30 milligrams of DMT in about 10-15 minutes of your time. It's the great conversion therapy. Well, that maybe not conversion therapy is the wrong word. That's something else.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's almost like the purest form of paradigm shift.
Yeah. Instantaneous paradigm shift. Yeah. You come back a different person with a different perspective on reality. It's almost unavoidable.
Now, we're going to take a break here in a couple of minutes so we can pick this up when we come back. But a couple of fundamental questions that I've often thought about. I want to frame this right. So you have a group, everybody has the ceremony at the same time. Do they interact? Do they ever have the same collective consciousness experience?
There are anecdotal accounts of that. I mean, what would be really cool, and a lot of people have suggested it, and I definitely agree with that, is to actually do that in a more formal setting. So have people in separate rooms, isolated from each other so they can't communicate, and then they all focus on something, whatever that might be, or they have to describe their experience in some way, and it would be formally measured, so you can look for correlations between the experiences, and test whether is this statistically significant. Does this make sense? Is there some clear, obvious correlation or suggestion that they're going to the same kind of place or interacting with the same entities? And you can imagine pushing that further and getting them to, people have suggested asking the entities to particular questions and seeing what the answer is. If you had very experienced explorers, psychonauts, who are used to navigating the space and can maintain their state of mind without being too kind of mind blown for extended periods of time, then you might be able to say, okay, go in there, ask this question, and then report back the answer. And then you have 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 people all doing that exactly the same time, and then they come back and you compare their answers, and then you say, okay, is there something going on there? Now, it doesn't necessarily mean, of course, now some people would say, oh, that's telepathy, right. I don't know which is more difficult to explain, right? Which is more kind of outside of normal reality, but these kind of experiments, I think, definitely need to be done. Multiple people doing DMT at the same time. And you can measure their brain wave and look for correlations there as well. And lots of different studies you can look for to see if people are having, at least to some extent, a shared experience. Whether they actually all meet, that would be really cool if they all met within the space and were describing exactly the same space at the same time and interacting with exactly the same being. That would be truly astonishing. But
now we'll keep this brief because we're going to go to a break. Terrence, who, and I've got, friends that knew him well. Okay. Terrence, who I was fascinated with his interviews and the stuff that he produced, and wrote about, and we don't have the time to get into all of that, but truly he understood it. But there's also, I think, a case of a bridge too far. And it seems that he was so wrapped up in the development of these ideas that he may have taken it too far. But he's like one of the only exceptions to this. I've never heard of other people going too far with it. Why do you think that is?
When you say going too far, you mean
he did it like 24 hours a day for weeks, right?
What, Terence McKenna?
Yes.
Well, I don't know what about his personal use. I mean, certainly I can only comment on his ideas. I mean, Terence McKenna was an ideas man. He was, it was like a piece of flint rolling down a mountain with just ideas sparking off him. You just listen to him and you will see, he will have this amazingly insightful or fascinating novel idea, and then it goes and he gets onto something else. So he's a great sort of mine for beautiful, interesting, fascinating ideas. Are they all correct? No, certainly not. A lot of them, his ideas he was having back in the 70s and 80s now would be highly discredited and shown not to be true. But there are few people who was able to articulate the DMT state as well as Terence McKenna, and to formulate wide-ranging hypotheses about what it might represent. No one else could do that. He was extremely erudite. He'd read ridiculously widely. And I would be, I'm so jealous of he was able to read and had such a broad knowledge. But I think even now, Terence McKenna has always been a huge inspiration for me, because someone who can try to maintain some kind of healthy skepticism whilst at the same time reaching into territory that most scientists would just definitely, fear to tread, without any doubt.
Or give up, fear to tread, or just, throw up their arms. Now, if there is a 15, I keep saying we need to take a break. Okay, at the last question before the break, a quick answer. So 10 to 15 minute experience. Can I repeat that experience 20 minutes later?
Yes, it's the short answer. There's no subjective tolerance with DMT, which is again one of its
Really?
unique pharmacological peculiarities. Strassman actually demonstrated this in his study. Rick Strassman, who did the study in New Mexico in the 1990s, he injected someone with a breakthrough dose of DMT, or several people actually. He had a whole group, a cohort, inject him with DMT. He measured the intensity of the effects using a specially developed rating scale that he developed. Then 30 minutes later, or 45 minutes later, however long it was, he injected them again, measured the intensity, and it was the same every time. He did that several times. So yeah, I mean, what does happen sometimes is you get something called a lockout effect, which often happens with repeated use over many weeks or months, where basically you will smoke DMT and then you'll get some people describe like a huge X, like a red X comes in there, or they get some entity will wag their finger at them and say, no, not today, or they'll get the middle finger often. So it seems to be like they are deciding These, like, okay, you're doing this too much. You're not taking this seriously enough. We're gonna kick you out and not allow you back in, and that can last for sometimes for several months before they allow you back in again. But as long as you do it respectfully, for most people, you can in theory do it. Yes, you can. If you have like a vape, one of these modified e-cigarettes people are using nowadays. That's the most efficient. But I think it's a great development, actually. Dissolve it in this e-liquid, and people will lay on their bed and take a hit, break through, and then come back and then take another hit, and they kind of ride it over for as long as they want, for several hours. It's an incredible thing. No subjective tolerance. We can't say the same with LSD or psilocybin. You get
pot, right?
Or pot, tachyphylaxis, but you don't experience that with DMT. So it's another pharmacological peculiarity of DMT which sets it apart.
And only the ancients knew. Our guest tonight, Andrew Gallimore, live from Tokyo, Japan. We'll be back after this short break. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. This is Fade to Black. Subscribe to our YouTube channel to get your alerts and access to over 2,000 videos. Click that subscribe button right now. Go to jimmychurchradio.com and get the Fade to Black official podcast. 2,000 episodes, all of them commercial free for just $2 a month. This is Jimmy Church. Please visit and explore Egypt this October 3rd through the 14th, 2024 with Billy, Elizabeth, myself, and very special guest and the #1 podcaster in the world, Sean Kelly. It's simple to do. Just go to forbiddenknowledge.com and click on upcoming tours, or click on the link below. We'll see you there. Watch Into the Vortex on Gaia TV. It's Fade to Black for the screen. Simple to do. Go to Gaia.com, search Jimmy Church, or click on the link below. Follow Fade to Black on Twitter at JChurchRadio. Get all of the show updates every single day. It's now called X, but who cares? How you doing? Jimmy Church here. Special announcement. Get your Fade to Black t-shirts. That's right. Help support the show. Help support everything that we do over here. We've got 2 t-shirts. We've got 2 ways to get them. And right now, if you get a Game Changer membership for a limited time, you will get Fade to Black blend coffee with your Game Changer membership. That's right. We have 2 t-shirts. We have the original, the classic Fade to Black t-shirt. You know you want one. Post a picture. Send it to us. We'll put it in our Fade to Black gallery. And we've got the new official Fade to Black t-shirt drawn by Michael Oming. 2 t-shirts, 2 ways to get them. Get yours today. Everything is in stock. Everything gets autographed. Everything includes shipping. And you're going to get a tracking number. And with the Game Changer membership, you get an email to me. You get unlimited commercial-free downloads of the show. Those are uploaded every single night after the show to the website. So don't delay. Get your Fade to Black t-shirt today. Go Backley Tappy. Go to jimmychurchradio.com and become a Fadernaut. Get a membership. That's right. Everything is commercial free. You have access to downloads, and you get to call yourself a Fadernaut. River Moon Coffee, makers of the Fade to Black blend. Truly the best coffee on planet Earth. Just visit rivermoonwellness.com or their Amazon store. It's all simple to do. You can check out the Fade to Black blend, the Game Changer blend, or any of their Black Moon Wellness products. It's the only coffee I drink. It is the best, and it's Doc. Again, rivermoonwellness.com. All right. Welcome back, Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. Our guest tonight, Andrew Gallimore, live from Tokyo, Japan. Tonight, we're talking about DMT and alternate realities in an alien world. Andrew, I've often wondered if the brain-computer interface gets perfected. DARPA's probably already done it, by the way. But anyway, we get that done, and then we record somebody's DMT experience. The world would get to see it. It's a fascinating thought because it is another world. Would everybody be ready for something like that, to see what is being activated and this other dimension that we're transported to?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's certainly something I've thought about, and I think there's always the problem we have is that it's the same with dreams, really, in that the primary portal to the quality of subjective experience is the reports, is the verbal report, people describing, telling you what they see. And as I said earlier, that it's simply insufficient to use English to actually really convey what this experience is like, what you're seeing. And it relies upon memory as well. You have to kind of remember what you experience, which is very, very difficult. So the idea of, first of all, having real techniques for real-time transmission of information from within the space, whether that is someone specially trained who can actually maintain verbal communication skills at the same time, or even better, as you suggested, some kind of connection to the brain that would deliver information, whether you would actually get accurate rendering, because these are not simply images. That's important to point out. We're not talking about image, we're talking about impossible domains. We're talking about worlds that are impossible literally impossible in their construction, in their geometry, that cannot exist in our three-dimensional world. So how you would render that, you would have to have a kind of lower dimensional projection of that. It's like trying to project a hypercube into a 3D or a 2D format. You never really appreciate it, right? We've all seen pictures of the hypercube, the 4-dimensional cube, but it's not, you're not really seeing that as it is. You're seeing this lower dimensional projection. So there would have to be some compromise there. The idea that you're going to actually be able to see and experience what someone else is experiencing by looking at a screen, no, I don't think that's going to be achievable. But you might be able to get some kind of rendering of what they're experiencing, in the same way that you might be able to get some rendering of what someone experiences during a dream. And I think the technology is heading in that direction. How long it will take, I don't know. What we already have is there's some kind of fairly recent research where scientists can at least determine the kind of image that you're seeing by recording neural activity. Differentiate whether you're looking at a cat or a dog or whatever. But we're certainly still far away from being able to take that raw neural data and show you on a screen in real time exactly what someone is experiencing, particularly if it's something entirely novel and something that's unrelated to anything that you're likely to see in this world. But sure, that to me, it's an obvious thing that should be looked at and that should be developed, because I think it would be much better for performing quantitative comparisons between experiences if you could have some kind of rendering, even if it's not a faithful representation of what someone's seeing. At least it would give someone an idea of the type of experiences that people are undergoing, the types of being, the type of structures, the type of geometry, and the topology of the space. Might be much more amenable to formal analysis if you can have some kind of mathematical rendering on a screen, or some other data structure that could be made sense of by mathematicians.
Okay, so and you're having difficulty, which I respect so much, of trying to describe this alien world. Is it possible to have AI understand the chemical influences of DMT on consciousness and have it render a DMT experience? It like you said, it's nearly a mathematical construct. Is something like that possible?
Well, I think certainly it seems like an obvious use case for AI, that it would interpret and the neural information. You could feed the neural information to the AI, for example. If you had an AI that was trained, for example, to take someone's brain image, neural information, patterns of neural activity during when someone was just viewing the world normally, or viewing images, right? And then train the AI on that data such that it can reasonably faithfully represent what someone is seeing. Then you might ask, well, what if you give it the neural information from someone undergoing a DMT experience? Would it be able to render this alternate reality in some sort of form? It makes more sense, I think, as a use case for AI than trying to do that through other means. So yeah, how successful it will be and how long it would take to reach that stage, I'm not sure. But yeah, that's certainly something I've been thinking about, and other people have been thinking about since AI exploded onto the scene a couple of years ago.
DMT use would probably go down. I ain't going there, man. I'm not going there.
Well, it might do, but it's like, the map is not the territory, and I don't think you can faithfully represent. I mean, there are lots of YouTube videos, you can find them, that will say, the DMT experience rendered in 4D or something. 4D, is that right? I don't know. 4K, I don't know. You know what I'm talking about. High resolution.
I've seen them. Yes.
Yeah. But I've watched them, and it's like, You're not even close.
Really? Right.
You're
So,
not
some of it's
even
fun though.
close.
Okay. Okay. Now, again, fundamental questions, but you're the expert, and I'm here to learn. Okay. Um, where I've heard, on the backs of toads and MEO5 and this and all these different descriptions, are these things accurate? Can you go to the desert and find toads and scrape their backs?
Not quite, but you're in the right ballpark. You're in the right parish, so to speak. So yeah,
Right.
5-methoxy DMT. So this is a different molecule actually. It's not DMT. It's a completely different experience. But yes, it's found in many plants alongside DMT actually. But it's also uniquely found in a specific species of toad, Bufo alvarius, or the Colorado river toad. I think it goes by other names as well, which I forget. But yeah, it's not actually the back. It's these glands which kind of here. I don't know. I don't have a toad's head, so it's hard to find the corresponding position on the anatomy. But these parotid glands, which you can squeeze and get this milky juice out of, and dry it, and then smoke it, and people do. And these toad shamans have popped up all over America now, who are kind of chasing down these poor toads, which are an endangered species actually. So please don't do that. You can 5-methoxy DMT is synthesizable. It can be synthesized in the laboratory. It was synthesized decades ago. It's not a difficult molecule to construct. So if you're going to use 5-MeO DMT, then it's better to use synthetic 5-MeO DMT rather than chasing down these poor toads and threatening them, because, well, we want the...
No, it's just not a cool thing to do. Not a cool thing to do. Oh man, it's just the strangest visual. I need that out of my head. So the other rumor, right? Let's go with pop culture, right? Storytelling, mythology. The DMT is produced by the pineal gland. Yes? No?
Ooh.
Where is it?
Story on this, or
Well, there's a reason why I'm asking. Okay. And then you can tell me where it's produced. Okay. But I've often thought, and this is not an original thought. I didn't plant a flag here, but I certainly thought about it on my own. I hear other people talk about it, which is this. At the time of death, so many, and especially with a near-death experience, talk about these same things: tunnel of light, going at the end, life review, and I've often thought that through an adrenaline push or something else, that the brain goes into overdrive, and that I think that DMT is fired off and to extreme amounts, and that is what is causing these similar experiences through, oh man, I'm about to die, and whatever happens, is that a possibility here, that life review is caused from a DMT explosion in the body?
Okay, so let's talk about the pineal first. So the pineal gland is about the size of the end of your little finger. Very small. It's a gland that's evolved to produce melatonin, which is a tryptamine. It's related to DMT, but it's involved in the sleep-wake cycle. So it's activated during darkness. As the sun goes down, your pineal gland starts to produce melatonin, which makes you sleepy. Which is why melatonin is good if you suffer from insomnia. But it only produces very, very tiny amounts. We're talking nanograms, very, very tiny amounts of melatonin. It's a small gland. It's not designed, should we say, or hasn't evolved to be pumping out large amounts of molecules. Now, the idea that the pineal can also as well as producing nanograms of melatonin, or micrograms maybe. I forget the exact numbers, but anyway, it's kind of irrelevant because the amount of DMT that you need to produce to actually induce these kind of profound psychological effects is tens of milligrams quite quickly. So the idea that the pineal gland can actually start pumping out this amount, constructing and pumping out this amount of DMT is highly unlikely. I think there are historical, mystical reasons why people are fascinated by the pineal gland. You can read lots online about decalcifying your pineal gland, the freedom filter, and all this kind of stuff. But you have to kind of separate the facts from probable fiction here. I don't think you need to invoke the pineal gland. DMT has been found in mammalian brain. I don't think you need to invoke the pineal gland to explain that. There are plenty of other cells in the brain that could be constructing DMT. It could also be constructed by the lungs, which we've known since the 1960s contain the requisite enzymes to be constructing DMT. Very large surface area, perfect site for producing DMT, which would go into the brain as well. So I don't see why this focus on the pineal gland at all. So that's that part. Now, when it comes to your idea, which again, as you've said, other people have spoken about the idea of what happens towards death, near-death experiences. Well, there's a number of lines of thinking and scientific study actually on this very topic. Not conclusive, but suggestive, shall we say, right? One is now David Luke, a very prominent psychedelic researcher, psychologist, with his PhD student at the time, now postdoc, I think, Pascal Michael, did a study of analyzed NDEs and compared them to the DMT state and compared them to the 5-methoxy DMT state. And actually, the near-death experience looks kind of, when you look at the phenomenological features, the content, the structure of the near-death experience, it looks almost like a combination of DMT and 5-MeO-DMT. Now, both of these could be produced quite straightforwardly by the brain. So it wouldn't surprise me if during a near-death experience, the brain was ramping up its production of both 5-MeO-DMT and DMT, perhaps at different levels. Now, you suggested, adrenaline or something, right? What is the trigger for that? Now, there's
holy crap is the trigger, right?
Well, holy crap might be the trigger, but I'm going to restrict it to physiology, if I may.
Right.
So there is some very interesting work being pioneered by the pharmacologist Edie Fresca, who works with Dennis McKenna, Terence McKenna's brother. Now, he suggested that DMT, because DMT, as well as binding to this particular serotonin receptor, it also binds to this receptor called the sigma-1 receptor. And what he found is that when DMT bind in low oxygen conditions, right, this is important, states of hypoxia, when the brain is starved of oxygen, when your brain cells, your neurons are starved of oxygen, they start to die, right? This is what happens when you have a stroke. And of course, this is what happens close to death, as your respiratory system, your cardiovascular system starts to fail, your brain becomes starved of oxygen. Now, what he found is that if he treated neurons in a hypoxic, low oxygen environment, when they were undergoing hypoxic stress, if he treated them with DMT, they would survive for much longer. So what's going on here? This might suggest that in a state where you're close to death, oxygen levels in your brain start to drop. This hypoxic state triggers the production of DMT and perhaps also 5-MeO-DMT, which is like your brain's last attempt to save the brain, to keep the brain alive. Perhaps should you actually recover, if your heart is started again, or your physiology recovers, your brain won't be damaged. And so there's a whole to me, this whole thing kind of makes sense, right? You're dying, your brain is starved of oxygen, the brain pumps up levels of DMT in order to help preserve your neurons in this low oxygen state. This is the near-death experience. Subjectively, of course, you have this near-death experience, which is caused by the DMT and also possibly the 5-MeO DMT, and this is your near-death experience. So there's a mechanism that makes sense as well. And of course, if it's your lungs, this would be a great sensor, if you like, for initial sensing for a low oxygen condition. When your lungs start to fail, that low, the drop in oxygen in your lungs could be the trigger which causes your lungs to start producing large amounts of DMT, which goes into your brain and helps to protect the brain. So you can imagine this thing being perfectly plausible. It's certainly not definitive, it's not proven, but in my head, that's not a bad idea.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me. I think that some things like this are right out in front of us and very obvious, but most scientists are they've got blinders on. They want to stay in their lane, right? They don't want to get out and talk about consciousness or these other alternative ideas, when the brain and consciousness and how it operates, it's probably the most perfect thing created in the universe. But science just wants to back off of it.
Yeah, I think there's always been a neglect of subjective experience, because you can't get at it, you see. You know, you can measure someone's brainwaves, you can measure someone's chemicals in their bloodstream or whatever. You can measure their skin conduct. All these things you can measure and you can produce data. It's much more difficult to measure what someone is experiencing. And so there's a tendency to say, okay, they're hallucinating now. And that's been the case for the whole of the 20th century, really. You know, very few people, apart from a few kind of niche dream researchers and stuff, most scientists just don't want to touch the phenomenology, the actual subjective experience. And so they're quite happy to say, okay, you take DMT, you're hallucinating. You know, hallucination is a hallucination is a hallucination. That's a grave mistake, in my opinion, because DMT hallucinations, as they would call them, differ markedly from dreams. For a start, they differ markedly from psychotic hallucinations. A hallucination is not just a hallucination. There are different types of hallucinations. Some are easy to explain, or easier to explain. Some are much, much, much more difficult to explain. And DMT, in my opinion, falls into that latter category. It's not easy to explain. It's not easy to put them into that bucket that we just call.
You can't measure it. You can't measure it. You can't collect data. Sean Carroll, great physicist, and I've got a certain affection for Sean Carroll, especially when he talks about time. He's a very, very brilliant guy, but I almost canceled him like a check when I heard him say, this is what he said. So once a month he does a AMA, right? He's answering questions from his whatever. And the question is, so Sean, what's consciousness? And that's the one question you just don't ask a scientist or physicist. You just don't do it. But anyway, and he reads it, and this is, you know what this is, and I'm not paraphrasing. This is a quote. He goes, "Why would I waste my time on something I can't see?" And I was like, dude, really? I mean, he just went right there. Next question, right? I was like, oh my God. And that's where science is with this. And it's like the most fascinating part. Now let's back up if we can. You described DMT and 5-MeO as being different. But explain to everybody what you mean.
Well, DMT is characteristically extremely visual. It's characterized by its structure and its content. It's highly structured. It's extremely visually rich. There's a lot a lot going on extremely quickly, extremely complex, extremely dynamic, lots going on here. With 5-MeO-DMT, people describe it more like passing through that. A friend of mine, Carl Smith, described it. He said, if DMT is like the 5th dimension, then 5-MeO-DMT is like the 12th dimension. You push through that, push through all of the form, and you're into this domain of infinite white light, pure consciousness, that kind of state. Completely different. But you can imagine perhaps there being some kind of trajectory, some kind of scale when you push past the DMT state, past form, past all form and content and structure, into this formless, pure domain of pure awareness, pure white light, pure consciousness. Those are the kind of states that people describe with 5-MeO-DMT.
Okay, so if I'm understanding you correctly, to appreciate or understand the 5-MeO, you should first understand and comprehend the DMT state, right? You can't just go past elementary school and go to college.
Well, some people do. I mean, not everyone. Most people would take DMT first. First of all, it's much more readily available. It's generally people find 5-MeO to be more difficult to integrate. It's more. The old saying is DMT is the power and the glory. 5-MeO is the power, DMT is the glory. So DMT is this very visual thing, you know, you're thrust into this alternate reality and then you're out again, whereas 5-DMT pushes you into this extremely profound and unexpected state of consciousness that many people find utterly horrifying, as if feel like they've died. And I think you don't want to mix them up, is what I'm saying here, basically. First of all, 5-MeO is active at much lower doses. So with DMT, you need maybe 30, 40 milligrams for a breakthrough dose. With 5-MeO, you're looking at 10. So you know, do not mix these up. These are not the same thing. It's not the same drug. You don't get DMT from the toad. You get 5-methoxy-DMT. They're different molecules. They're different experiences. I think there's much less research on 5-MeO-DMT. We know much less about it. There is, I know the team at Imperial College London are actually just starting a similar study that they did with DMT, looking at the patterns of neural activity when someone is giving 5-MeO-DMT. So perhaps in the next couple of years, we'll start to understand, to some extent at least, what's happening in someone's brain and how that differs from what's happening with DMT. So I don't think we're at the stage yet where we can say definitively, you know, this is how DMT relates to 5-MeO-DMT. They're kind of separate experiences. However, some people do describe in breakthrough DMT states often catching a glimpse of the 5-MeO-DMT state, as if it's kind of a little bit far off, and it's impossible for either of us to imagine what that's like. But you get the idea that there is some connection there, as if there is some, that 5-MeO is transcending what you experience with DMT, taking you past all form and into the formless.
In this alien world, can you navigate it? Now, you've described that you know there's like 3 minutes. Can you run around? Do you have 3 minutes like a maze? Can you navigate?
Well, for most people, the answer is it's more like being guided, carried. It's like many people, a very common experience is you burst through into this place and some entity, some being, whether you see them or not, guides you very, very quickly through these different rooms or different domains and shows you things. There's this great sense of, oh, you're here. Let's get this party started. And they kind of take you by the hand and they're showing you all around, seemingly aware that you've only got, you know, a few minutes, that time is limited. Now, in 2016, I mentioned earlier, I developed this technology, you could call it, this protocol for extending it, the DMT state. So what you do is you use what's called target-controlled intravenous infusion technology. So this is the same thing that's used by anesthesiologists to maintain a stable level of an anesthetic drug in your brain.
Well, like drip, 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 drip.
Not a drip as such. It's like a machine with a syringe attached, and it pushes the plunger on the syringe according to a controlled rate, so it keeps a steady stream of DMT into your bloodstream, and that compensates the DMT that's being lost by metabolism and excretion. So the idea is you counterbalance that, and that maintains a relatively stable level of DMT in your brain. And so this allows you then to stabilize the DMT state, which means you can induce someone into the DMT state, and then you can hold them there. Now, Imperial College London have published last year their first implementation of this in humans. They were able to hold people, really just a small pilot study, just to test that it was safe and effective, so to speak, and tolerable. Able to hold people in their subjects in there for 30 minutes perfectly happily. But this could be extended. There's no reason why this couldn't be an hour or 2 hours or longer. Then you with experienced users, you have a much greater potential for exploration and navigation and learning how to move through the space. But you're right, with 2 or 3 minutes, most people, certainly if you're not particularly experienced with it, it's just like, hold on. It's like being on a roller coaster. Hold on tight, and we'll see you back in a few minutes.
Now, what about in this alien world? Let's just go with alien. And by the way, you see my T-shirt. I've got my alien T-shirt on tonight for you. Yeah, I wore for you. Do you smell things?
That's a good question.
Right? Do you smell? You're in another world, right? So would there be a sense of could you reach out and see if something is hot or cold? Are your senses, is everything still tactile?
Generally, no, because generally I don't want to be 100% definitive. There'll be people who watch you and go, so, well, actually, in my experience, but generally,
right.
You become disembodied. You lose any awareness of having a body, and so the idea of reaching out and touching things kind of doesn't
wait. Okay, pump the brakes. So you're saying that this isn't like Michael Jordan in the movie Space Jam, right? Or the movie What Dreams May Come, or what have you, where you are in this new environment. And you look out and you look at your hands. You're saying that's not going to happen. No.
Most people lose any awareness of having a body, or even ever having had a body. So you're like a point of awareness within this space. You can certainly move through. There's a sense of movement through the space, and some people, can look around and. But the idea of actually having your body as you normally do and being an embodied creature is generally gone. So the idea of touching things, I think, doesn't really make sense in that.
Right. So you are becoming a ball of consciousness.
Basically, yeah. You are becoming a point of view, if you like. You're becoming literally a point of view within this space. The smells, people very rarely describe it, but normally, often with DMT, it has a very strong smell. So people will often, that lingers, even when you're in the state. But no, people don't. It's not like interacting with the normal waking world, is what I'm getting at. Basically, it's primarily visual. There is some sound, but it seems to be different. There's often popping and whirring kind of sounds, high frequency pops, and electronic kind of sounds, but quite different to the soft, warm sounds of my voice. For example.
You do have a pretty good voice, by the way. Okay, a couple of questions for me, if I may. And I hope I'm not sounding juvenile in asking them in this fashion. But in the ayahuasca experience, in a general sense, and I've got so many friends of mine that have gone through this experience that describe the mother, the godmother, this guidance, this thing that, this all-knowing experience that is there in front of them. Some will say intimidating. So there's that. I'm going to continue, but is that typically in a DMT 10-minute experience? But before you answer, then we have, the robot jaguars and the snakes and the robots, and this geometric construct that all of this is living inside of. And that's the ayahuasca experience. Does that fold over and roll over into the 10-minute DMT experience?
Yes, often it does. I mean, first of all, so there've been a number of studies that have looked at the phenomenology. So particularly the types of entities, types of beings that are encountered in the DMT state and in the ayahuasca state. By far the most common type of being that people experience after smoking DMT, or taking DMT, pure DMT, not ayahuasca, is some kind of warm, guiding, motherly female presence, right? That's certainly not the only, but we're talking about a high proportion.
In a general sense,
sense, right? And people who take ayahuasca describe similar, mother ayahuasca is a term that's often used. So yes, there is often some overlap, and when people take ayahuasca as well, if they get a good hit, they will often experience more bizarre kind of alien type encounters. People have written to me and described, I was expecting to see mother ayahuasca and I got accosted by these alien beings. What the hell is going on? This isn't what I signed up for. That kind of thing. So yeah, I mean, basically, ayahuasca is, the primary active component of ayahuasca is DMT. The difference is the setting. Certainly, first of all, is the setting. Generally, is you're taking ayahuasca in a very different setting, very different circumstances. The people that get, I think, overly obsessed with the form of these beings. When you see a snake, for example, or a jaguar or something like this, the idea of, as I said before, that these intelligences actually occupy the form of an embodied earthly creature is, of course, absurd. But that's the form that your brain is using. This is how they appear to you. Whether they're directing it, or your brain is trying to make sense of this external source of sensory information. It could be both, but that's just the model that your brain is constructing. And I don't think you need to be too concerned about exactly what these beings look like. I don't think that's necessarily overly important. Another thing about ayahuasca is that even with a decent dose of ayahuasca, the levels of DMT that reach your brain, the peak concentration, is normally only about 20% of what you reach with a good breakthrough hit of smoked or vaped DMT. So DMT really does push you often very, very quickly into an extremely intense state that's often much more intense than what you would achieve in ayahuasca. So ayahuasca, unless you get a really strong, very syrupy decoction, it's likely to be a much more drawn out, softer, generally, but not always, experience. And whereas with smoked DMT, you're right there within 20 seconds, 30 seconds, and your brain levels go to a much, much higher level. So I don't think there's major differences there, in my opinion. The molecule is where the magic happens, basically, no matter what technique you use.
When you look at, again, these are questions for me. When you look at some of the creative artists, not only today, but throughout history, whether it's painting, writing, right? It doesn't matter today, filmmakers, whatever the medium is. But when it is absolutely foreign to different world, right? It's different, man. It's a dreamscape situation. Do you think that these are individuals that have managed, right, controlled the environment and are able to get it into a medium, whether it's words or painting or a film, that they are able to get to that state somehow? And maybe they're doing it artificially, right? But there is DMT in the body too, as well.
Yeah, I think certainly. I mean, many artists now, modern artists, there are some very good DMT artists, so to speak. Artists who use DMT and have managed to not faithfully replicate the experience as such, but to get the ambiance. That's the really difficult thing with is trying to get that feeling, that sense. There's a great artist called, I don't know how to say it, Insedigris, I think he's called Edigris. If you Google him, you look at one of his digital images, and they're not very complex, these images, but he gets the ambience just right, and it sends a bit of a shiver down your spine. Another one is a friend of mine called Harry Pack, who everyone should Google, and he really, again, is a specialist in getting the ambience right. So that's certainly one thing you can do, is to take DMT, and if you're a skilled artist, bring the flavor back, not replicate it, because that's just not going to be possible on a canvas, right? But to get the ambience right, get the feeling, get the tone right, and get some of the geometry right, and you can really give someone an impression of the type of ambience that you get with DMT. But yeah, I mean, certainly other artists can reach altered states through other means. DMT is certainly not the only. High doses of mushrooms you can approach with very high doses of mushrooms the same kind of geometry and often entity encounters as you get with DMT. DMT is just the most efficient and reliable tool, in my opinion, that we have in the world to almost guarantee an audience with these beings. But whether other people can reach these states through breath work or other meditation techniques, I don't know. I mean, I'm not an expert on that kind of thing, but
I'm looking at some of his man, he's incredible. He's incredible, man. He's an incredible Insedigris. That's a pretty, what it reminds me of? It reminds me, I used to live in Panama, right? And it reminds me of the Mayan indigenous Indian culture that lives in the jungles, and they would come into Panama City and sell their artwork. Reminds me of that. I mean, to a degree. Yeah.
That might not be a coincidence, you see. So
no, I don't see this as being a coincidence at all. Man, he is really good.
Yeah.
This IJ, is that how you say his name? He's pretty good too, as well. Wow. I could get wrapped up into this. How vivid, we're almost out of time, but when you're looking at images like this, the colors, this panchromatic, right? This epic widescreen color thing, is it overload? Could it be too much?
Oh,
maybe 3 minutes is about right.
Yeah, for most people, it's more than enough. It really is mercifully brief. But yeah, the people describe seeing colors that don't exist, seeing colors that they've never seen before. I mean, it's impossible for anyone. I can't imagine a color that I've never seen. It's like, it doesn't make any sense in a certain sense. But yeah, people describe qualia, people describe subjective subjective experiences, including colors. I mean, it's not just very, very bright colors, but actually different types of colors that don't exist in the natural world, that we don't experience in a normal state of consciousness. And as I said before, the complexity, the dynamism, the experience unfolds with such beauty. It's beautifully finessed. It's like watching the greatest animated movie that you've never seen and never could see in the real world. just being presented for you perfectly. And it's like, how in God's name is the brain doing this?
Right.
Unless it's receiving some sort of guidance, instantaneously. It's so dynamic, and this flood of information that comes in, the complexity, the dynamism, the strange geometry and the topology of the space, all unfolding in perfect
assembling is the word. Assembling is the word.
Exactly. It assembles it, it disassembles it, and reassembles it in a new form just right before you, as if it's showing off, as if it's saying, look what we can do when you give us access to your brain here.
Yeah. And we're only using I hate to say it, 5%, 6%, 7% on a good day, right? That's
not quite true. I mean, we are.
you know what I'm saying. So, but what about music? Okay, now obviously you can look behind me, right? And that's not DMT. Those are real, right? All this. Okay, so I'm into music, but there's different types of music. Would that influence your experience, like listening to Pantera versus the Carpenters or some indie?
I wouldn't suggest either, but I mean,
right.
People do. I mean, certainly. I mean, minimally, it can set the tone. It can create part of the setting, right? A lot of it is a part of what's your environment before you go in, your own personal, your set, as it's traditionally called, your own mental state and your emotional state and all of that stuff. And then what is the setting? What kind of environment are you in? And creating that minimally before you go in with the right music. Whether it's electronic, the Orb or Orbital or something, or Aphex Twin, or whether it's Pantera. I've never heard anyone doing that, but it's something to experiment with.
Right? Yeah. Cemetery Gates. I don't think would be a good idea.
The experience, I'm not sure, but it could do. You're introducing another source of sensory information, auditory sensory information that could interfere or modulate the trip in some way. And certainly during these studies in Imperial College and stuff with psilocybin and other psychedelics, they will create the mood, they create the setting with the right soundtrack, the right playlist to help create that whole gestalt of the setting that helps to guide the experience. And I think that's very useful.
I said for many, many years, Andrew, that I would never do any hypnotherapy or regression or any of those sessions, right? That I would never do it. But I interviewed so many different therapists and people that had gone through it, and it kind of inhibited the questions that I could ask. I was inquisitive, of course, but I hadn't gone through the experience. Now I have. My questions are different. When I have you back on the show, the questions will be different. Okay? All right?
Got it.
Okay, you got it? Where can everybody follow your stuff?
Well, my main social media is Twitter /X. Alien Insect is my handle. I'm also on Instagram if you want to follow my daily life stories. Again, Alien Insect. My website, where you can find all of my interviews and papers that I've written, links to look at my books, that's buildingalienworlds.com. Of course, for those watching, my books, Alien Information Theory, my first book, I don't know what I'm doing, here we go, yeah, full color, all designed by myself. And my latest book, Reality Switch Technologies, which is I think the most comprehensive and detailed guide to how psychedelics work in the brain, how the neuroscience, the chemistry, the pharmacology, all the different classes of psychedelics, how they change the structure of your dynamics of your world. This is all in this book, recommended by Hamilton Morris, no less. So again, you can go to my website, you can see links to look inside that and a few sample pages. And I'm writing a new book now. Well, I've just finished writing, actually, the first draft, which will be out next year, which is all about the history and the science and the mystery and getting to grips with the implications of DMT. So, yeah, that's one to look forward to.
Thank you so much, Andrew. Perfect show, my friend. Like I said, the next one is going to be a little different.
Got it.
I want you to behave. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jimmy.
Andrew Gallimore. And that is a perfect way to start off another week here on Fade to Black. Fascinating show. And I say it all the time. I'm here to get my learn on. And I certainly did that tonight. Thank you, Andrew. Perfect. And Andrew's website, buildingalienworlds.com. The links are below, over on social media and on our website. All right. What a perfect night on the show. Fade to Black is produced by Hilton J. Palm, Renee Newman, and Michelle Freed. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Genocide. Thank you, Dex. Thank you, Dennis. Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, Kevin. Webmaster is Drew the Geek. Music, Doug Aldrich. Intro, Spaceboy. SpaceboyMusic.com. Fade to Black is produced by KJC over the Game Changer Network, and this broadcast is owned and copyrighted 2024 by Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network, Inc. It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, copied, or used anywhere in the known universe without written permission from Fade to Black of the Game Changer Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Until tomorrow night, I want you to be safe. Go Beckley Tepe.